part 1 of a 2-part video. Please see part 2 on my channel, ILoveKimPossibleAlot. And make sure you support both Cellspecs and I by subscribing and pressing your notification button for your animation consumption needs.
Finished a decade, and with Onward on the horizon, this seems like a decent time to finally do this. The arbitrary ranking of movies of the animation company that has made it okay to openly weep in front of your children. The company whose reputation implies high quality, both in beauty and complex ideas, and not just for the family market. And even though in this decade they might have been a little bit safer and shakier than the previous one, but that's still more or less true.
Pixar has a whole plethora of content going into Onward, ranging from the great to the why, Pixar why. They've become a powerhouse of animation, and sometimes their strategies are more misses than wins. They want to improve the industry and try more nuanced storytelling techniques, change it in such a positive way. Without further ado, the worst to best Pixar movies.
Piece of shit pie. I got a piece of shit pie.
Cars 2 is the lowest point for Pixar, with a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. Clearly the marketing team was more ahead of the story department.
I may still be the person that dislikes Cars 2 the least in the world, but even I can't fight that.
It's considered a big misstep in the company's filmography, but I guess if you like Mater a lot, it's not too horrible, I guess?
I don't particularly like or dislike Mater, but this is another case of making the comic relief character the protagonist in his own spin-off to predictably underwhelming results. It's not a bad spy thriller. The way it incorporates the car terminology and culture into its story is a little creative, and I think Michael Caine's character is fine, but it is a very routine spy thriller. There's completely no tension in 2 out of 3 of McQueen's races, but I do at least feel that there is a little bit more of a genuine friendship between the two in this. Besides, Pixar's lowest is a lot of other studios' middle, or even average.
It was like a nightmare, it's painful for me, 'cause nobody wants to die too fast.
I don't think I even remembered any specific details about this one. I think Nathan Fillion was in it for a hot minute.
It was the one where they tricked everyone into thinking Lightning McQueen was going to die.
Oh, right. And then later trailers revealed he wasn't, so no one cared anymore.
I expected more from Pixar than trailer tricks, but as it is, it's fine, I guess. It's a big step up from Cars 2, but that doesn't really say much.
It does have a more dramatic and character-driven story regarding generations and the importance of mentors, which I like conceptually, but this definitely seems to be the most why bother at this point of all their movies, especially since Cars 2 was so poorly received. My guess was that this was just made to push out the last of their Cars product inventory.
If you really care about the Cars series, then this is not the worst thing that's ever happened, but it's fair to say expectations were low for this one, and we get our expectations met.
To walk, they used to swim, they used to fly with a toothy grin.
I think Pixar's reputation made people expect a little bit too much from this. It is, on a technical level, a beautiful film that tells a very quaint, charming story at a refreshingly not hyperactive pace.
But visually, this film is jarring. I've heard these visuals being described as gummy on realistic backgrounds, which I don't object to. And although the pitch was fantastic, what happens if the meteor missed the dinosaurs, the execution of the film didn't really bring anything new to the table at the time. I think this played a lot into how the movie aged and has overall been received.
I mean, how many times has a dinosaur story predominantly been about traveling and reuniting with families? Sure, it works, but we've seen it. It's definitely a small-scale movie, and one that doesn't have much of a strong personality besides trying really hard to be a tearjerker. It is more or less adequate at that, but there's a reason why it's Pixar's still least profitable film.
Man, I hate Brave. What an overrated piece of mediocrity.
Wow, I didn't like it either, but that seems harsh.
No, it's not, but accurate. More specifically, I mourn for what this movie could have been. I mean, look at this trailer.
That is accurate. Cars 2 is definitely the worst. Cars 3 is the most forgetful. Good Dinosaur is the least profitable, but Brave is the most disappointing compared to initial expectation. For all of its implied epicness, it's just Celtic Freaky Friday. It is evident that this movie went through a lot of difficulties in development. The bear legend just feels like an excuse for a conflict left over from a previous draft that got discarded. All of the buildup regarding the marriage, only for the mother to just kind of decide to be over it. And this This has always bothered me. That time where the mom says she's pushing Merida into marriage to give her the things we never have. You are a queen! And at what point in this movie did Merida struggle with being brave? Now that archery scene is iconic, but it is the best part of the movie, and it's in the trailer. Some of the comedy's okay, and I am a sucker for the cultural aesthetic, and Merida as a character is energetic, but a bit one note.
Merida is really kind of boring. She's tended to not really be received that well because her whole character shtick has been done with films like Aladdin much better, like 20 years before this movie came out. A girl who wants freedom? What a compelling new concept. But I suppose it's a cute and a harmless film if you're into movies about parental subtext and reconnecting with the youth and stuff, but beyond that it's nothing special.
Baby car boom boom vroom vroom, baby car boom boom vroom vroom, baby car boom.
The movie that halted Pixar's high momentum to make people go, Pixar? Really?
I know, but ignoring the sequels, I have to admit that I have a bit of a soft spot for the first Cars. Yes, City Boy and the Boonies and reforming the D-bag is a pretty standard story, no denying, and McQueen is also one major D-bag in this. He is slightly more likable in both of the sequels, but as someone who did quite a few family cross-country car trips, I admit this setting is somewhat charmingly nostalgic to me. But putting that very personal bit aside, I like Doc as a mentor character, I think Mater is an okay comic relief, and there is something about its quaint and adequately written delivery that makes it very disposably watchable to me. But no, story-wise, it is not particularly interesting, and no character outside of the ones I've mentioned stands out even a little.
I was never really impressed with the original Cars. For a Pixar film, I don't really think it really earns the title of being the marketing king it's become. But if this is the first time you're being introduced to some of these tropes, I can see it being fun and entertaining to people. But Pixar? Really?
I wasn't taught how to get a job, but I can remember dissecting a frog.
I've never been big into college movies, and kinda like Cars 2, your tolerance for certain genres of stories, even if they're told well, will depend on how tired you are of their cliches.
But if you do like those stories, this is a fun comedy with a classic buddy-buddy relationship.
The story is nothing special, but I do like a lot of the details, like Dean Hardscrabble as the antagonist. The scare games are kind of fun, and that finale was actually pretty tense.
I never really was a big fan of the ending, and just the general forced aggression these two are under from both the dean and the other fraternities. It has this weird connotation that you don't have to go to college and you can do anything anyway. But in this economy and day and age, I'm not sure if that's a responsible message to be preaching to children. I guess it's a monster universe, so that's not too important.
It is a very standard underdog bully scenario, but I'm genuinely impressed that it sticks with the message of, sorry kids, sometimes dreams really won't come true no matter how hard you try. But that doesn't mean you can't be happy. That's mature and pretty gutsy. But I cannot forgive the blatant retcons. Monsters, Inc. specifically said that Mike and Sully had known each other since 4th grade. Unforgivable.
And it feels like not doing more with Randall was a really missed opportunity. It does leave some ideas to think about and does have some fun moments though.
I just don't think it lends itself that well to being a good Inc. prequel and more like an Elseworld story, but as a movie by itself, it's good enough.
They got little hands, little eyes, they walk around telling great big lies.
I feel like Bug's Life gets a bad rap, not helped by taking place between two of Pixar's most notable works. Well, if bad rap means virtually no rap. Partly from coming out alongside a similar film that tends to be favored more among older audiences because of its slightly more adult humor. But if nothing else, this one is way more pleasant to look at.
Let's face it, Toy Story was a tough act to follow, but I feel Bug's Life was ambitious for its time. It had an incredibly fun cast that kind of made up for the lackluster plot. These tropes don't exactly help it age, but what are you gonna do? It's still a fun flick. You get it? You get it?
Yep, it's the liar revealed misunderstanding trope again. It really is the dumb kind with the, oh no, he lied, that means our perfectly effective plan is useless. But at the same time, the plot is basically Seven Samurai with bugs, except they're circus people. As a concept, that's actually kinda neat. The movie has lots of clever comedic touches, Hopper is a great underrated villain, and I think its finale is incredibly satisfying with all the ants rising up, and Flick's F you Hopper speech is such a great badass Pixar moment that nobody ever talks about. Also, Dot is best ant princess, and it's the first time that we got Pixar bloopers.
And action. To infinity and beyond! I'm sorry.
I couldn't resist. Really, can you blame me? Okay, let's go for real now.
I can't remember the words to this song.
If you were to make a list of just Pixar's best characters, I feel like Dory would be in the top 5. She has such a unique, bright comedic energy, and not just from Ellen in her all-around personality as the product of the writing and animation.
But Finding Dory is all over the place. I feel like this movie only exists because Ellen wanted it so badly and it shows.
Well, also Disney loves money. That helps.
Its execution was a little forced, but it does have some incredibly touching moments. She followed the shells, guys.
I know! Her journey is fractured, but with such powerful highlights, with its themes highlighting the difficulties but also capabilities of people with disabilities. Linked to both Nemo and Debbie. It also has really solid side characters in The Octopus and the Whales. I do still think that final act feels very copy and pasted from lots of other films featuring animals driving trucks.
It's not nearly as tight as the first, and Nemo and Marlin don't really have anything to do here, but overall this one had a lot of heart, and it's a fun ride.
If I could get another chance, another walk, another dance with him.
Another tragic case of a film being really good, just not good enough as people's expectations of Pixar, so the reception is weaker than if it had been made by anybody else. While the story at first feels a bit ordinary for a movie where two brothers carry on the legs of their dead father in a world where magic cards are the equivalent of history books, everything in this movie is a well-calculated build-up to an incredibly bittersweet finale. This movie handles magic better than most fantasy movies, and we need more stories about siblings. It's certainly not as ambitious as their other projects, and supposedly you'll get more out of this if you're a D&D fan, but do not put this in the same category as Good Dinosaur. It is much more enjoyable, well-written, and heartfelt than that.
At the end of the day, this is a sweet movie that's about two brothers bonding over the loss of their father, and a way for them to spend time with him for just one last day. To be fair, the journey itself is a bit confusing. I doubt they would really bring back the dead forever, but it's still a sweet movie that helps its characters focus on what they have and what they don't.
On our way, let's be superheroes so we can save the world.
As for the sequel we actually wanted, while it pales in comparison to the first one, there is a family unity to this movie that just isn't in the first. The action is top-notch, I love the questions it poses about superhero society, though I would have liked it more if that had been more of the focus.
The movie's twist villain is one of the weaker ones, and our motivations and actions clash quite a bit. It's more or less solid. It's just kind of short of what I consider a Pixar masterpiece.
When somebody loved me, everything was beautiful.
We've talked about this, and I seem to like it a little bit better than KP does.
That's probably true. I'm kinda about this movie's sheer existence. I'm in the camp that there just should have been a short about Bo Peep reuniting with the toys, and that's it. And we did kinda get that, but not the way I wanted. As is, there's nothing inherently wrong with this film, and it does give Woody some good character struggle to think about.
It really is an interesting direction that I didn't think he would go in, and is another fascinating exploration into the life of toys, by showing potential alternative life paths. It doesn't really bother me, but I can definitely see people not liking this because of how it affects the end of the third one. The only thing I profoundly did not like was Buzz's subplot.
Plus that one joke with the Key and Peele toys was really funny. But at the end of the day, it will depend on your preferences and opinions about Toy Story 3.
Hey, you, boo! Did you hear that sound? Is it a monster?
I really like Monsters, Inc. I think it's incredibly creative and fresh. It's not my favorite film because the buddy comedy isn't really my jibe, but who cannot love Mike Wazowski, memes and all?
The design of the monster world and framing Scaring as a combination of sports star and oil drillers, that they all believe that the kids are poisonous, the teleporting doors that allow for that hilarious and creative chase sequence, this movie just is really creative.
Overall, the strength of the film is Mike and Sully's relationship, which I feel like is developed strongly in a compelling way, though it's not as tight as some other Pixar films.
The one thing Monster U did provide was some understandable context as to why Mike seems to be more invested in the scare record than Sully is. And gonna call it, this movie has the best Disney Pixar twist villain. Granted, it was also one of the first ones before the trope was worn down to its bone, but it is a brilliant mislead and setup and surprise, and boy does it look creepy when he starts running down that hallway. My headcanon is that this is the image that still keeps Boo up at night.